Welcome back. In the previous step, we configured the limit service to connect to the Spring Cloud config server. We created something called bootstrap.properties instead of application.properties to configure the URI of the Spring Cloud config server and get the limit service connected to it. And we saw that by default, limit service uses the default profile. So let's now configure a dev profile and a QA profile and see what values are picked up from the Spring Cloud config server. The important thing for you to understand is the fact that right now all the configuration for the limit service is coming from where? It's coming from the Git repository. We are not really configuring anything in the limit service. The only thing which we are configuring in the limit service is what is the URI of the Spring Cloud config server. That's the only thing. Other than that, all the other configuration for limit service is being configured in the Git repository. The advantage of configuring stuff in the Git repository is now the entire configuration of limit service is separated from the deployment of the limit service. You don't really need to worry about what the configuration that needs to be used when deploying it. It would automatically pick it up from the Git repository. Okay, enough theory. Let's get back to the practical stuff and configure a few profiles for the limit service. I'm opening up the bootstrap.properties inside the limit service, and over here by default we are using the default profile. I would want to use a specific profile. How do I do that? The way we can do that is by saying spring dot profiles dot active is equal to whichever profile you want to use. So let's say I want to use the dev profile starting off. So I would want to use dev. So 1 and 111. Those are the values I would want to use. So in your dev environment, all that you need to do is set the Spring profiles active is equal to dev. In this example, we are actually using bootstrap.properties to set the active profile. But actually, you can configure this in n number of ways. One of the ways you can pass in the active profile is through things like VM arguments or the Java application arguments and things like that. Now let's wait for the application to pick this change up. When I run the limits right now, you would see that the values that are being picked up are 111 and 1. If you look at the configuration of the dev, that's the values we have configured. So 1 and 111. Let's say I don't want to override the value for maximum. I would only want to override the value for minimum in the dev. The maximum I would want to pick up from the default which is present in here. Will the change be picked up immediately? When I refresh the URL, you'd see that there is no change. Why? Think about it. Why am I not getting the latest values? The reason is because I have not really committed it down to the Git repository. Only the changes that are committed to the local Git repository are available through the config server. So let's go ahead and commit them in. You can say git add star and now say git status. You'd see that I have modified one property file. That's cool. That's the one which I wanted to commit in. So git commit -m, and I would want to put in the comment saying removed configuration for maximum. Okay, that's done. And now I refresh it and still I don't pick up the new value. Why is it so? The thing is, we are connecting the limit service to the Spring Cloud config server. What happens is at the application startup, at the startup of limit service is when it picks up the values from the Spring Cloud config server. Let's restart the application to pick the changes up. I'm stopping the limit service and starting it again. At a later point in time, we would see that there is something called a refresh URL, which we can make use of to refresh the configuration from a Spring Cloud config server. But for now, let's just restart the application and execute the URI again. Now, you can see that the maximum is coming with the default value. What's the default value that we have? It's in the limit service.properties, it's 888. However, the minimum value, we are overriding it. So we are getting the value from the dev profile. In the Bootstrap, we configured a dev profile and we are picking up the values from the dev profile. Now, let's see what would happen when I change the profile. I would want to change the profile to QA. The application would start picking up the changes. You can see that it's picking up the changes and refreshing it. And now I can go ahead and execute the limits. And now you can see that the QA values are being picked up. So maximum 222, minimum of 2. These are all the values which are coming from the QA environment configuration. In the earlier step, we configured different environment properties, different environment configuration for the limit service in Git. We did that by creating configuration, limits service QA, limits service dev.properties and things like that in the Git repository. In this step, we looked at how I can configure profiles on the limit service to be able to pick up that specific configuration from the Spring Cloud config server. Until the next step, bye bye.